Welcome back to another FPL video. This will be the first of two team selection videos ahead of Game Week 9, and this will discuss my initial plans for Game Week 9, but things can definitely change over the course of the week. And there are some transfers I am considering, which I'll talk about in future videos as well. I'm going to also recap on how I did in Game Week 8 and also talk about possible plans in Game Week 10 as well using fpl.team. So if you end up enjoying this video, smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's try to get this video to over 300 likes, and we're getting ever closer towards 21,000 subscribers. We're around 100 away, so that'd be massively appreciated. But without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. I was very close to going for Johnston or Leno as my main goalkeeper, but in the end I went for Turner and Areola as my goalkeeper combination, and in the deadline stream I made a late switch and started Turner, and in the end he got the clean sheet whilst Areola conceded twice to Newcastle. So I'm very happy with how it all played out, and my two goalkeepers combined cost 8.3 million. Now there will be some times where they both have some bad fixtures, but generally speaking they rotate very well, and in Game Week 9 when Areola faces Aston Villa away, you've got Turner at home to Luton, and then afterwards you'd probably look to start Areola in most game weeks, because with the exception of game weeks 4 and 8, Areola has outscored Turner and he generally is the better FPL asset. But I'm still very happy with Turner. He does cost 4.1 million now, and I got him in at 4 million. He was also one of my goalkeepers at the start of the season, and I know he's not going to be ideal. He won't keep many clean sheets in the long term, but he offers very good value for money. He's the only starting 4 million goalkeeper at this moment in time. Let's wait and see when Vlaco Dimos finally gets the nod over the American. Even my defence was decent this week, with the exception of Matty Cash, who blanked in a 1-1 draw against Wolves. And I was actually expecting that result in that match, and I only played Matty Cash for his attacking potential, and I would have started him over most players this week anyway in the defence. And ultimately he's a very good option for the next 4 game weeks, and even over the next 6, which does include Tottenham away in Game Week 13. And in such fixtures I would be very tempted to bench Matty Cash, because so far this season Aston Villa have conceded many goals away from home against the best sides such as Newcastle and Liverpool. Of course they can improve, but I think the main appeal of Aston Villa is when they face weaker teams, especially at Villa Park. I think they're a bit weaker away from home. The same goes for the other two defenders who did very well this week. Joachim Andersen keeping a clean sheet in a goalless draw between Nottingham Forest and Crystal Palace. That was perfect for me because I had Turner and Andersen from this match from two different teams. It's very rare that you get clean sheets from both when you start two assets in the same game from different teams, and I'm very happy with how that turned out in the end. No bonus points for either of them, but still 6 points each, a clean sheet, and you can't ask for too much more there. And my final defender was a doggy who also got 6 points, no bonus, no assists whatsoever, and that Basuma red card changed things for sure. But Spurs still went on to score later on with 10 men and won in very impressive fashion. And I know Luton Town are probably one of the favourites to be relegated, but Tottenham did their job. They did enough to win the match, and they should have been 2 or 3-0 up before they even scored that goal and before the red card. And Destiny Doggy didn't have the best of games in particular, but he's still a very solid asset in the future. My only concern is that he's 2 yellow cards away from suspension, and once Spurs' fixtures turn, I don't think the doggy is one of the best defenders to have in the game, and there are definitely going to be some better assets later on in the season. But for now, I'm very happy with him and the rest of my defensive line. They all did a relatively decent job in Game Week 8. The midfield was by far the most disappointing part of my squad, with 1 or 2 exceptions, but Diaby wasn't one of them. He blanked against Wolves and was subbed out quite early on, got a 2-pointer, and that's about it. But I'm really targeting fixtures like Luton for Diaby and this triple up in Aston Villa. But you can make a case that 3 is probably a bit overboard and 2 is the sweet spot. And at the moment, Matty Cash and Watkins seem to be the best ways of covering Aston Villa at the moment. Then you look at the rest of my midfield, and you've got James Ward-Prowse in there, another one who blanked. He came very close to assisting against Newcastle. He's always a threat from set pieces, but generally speaking, he wasn't looking the most appealing from an FPL perspective and didn't have many chances in the game to either score or assist. I still like him a lot, but I did make a conscious decision to go for Ward-Prowse over Neto, and that also meant I went for a budget defender in Lascelles over Gabriel, and that could have turned out to be a big mistake on my wildcard. Not a huge one, and it's not the end of the world, but it also might have cost me a transfer or 2 later down the line when I could have been focusing on other positions. But there you go, I still like Ward-Prowse. The same goes for Salah, who definitely did very well this week, and one of the main reasons why ultimately ultimately Game Week 8 was fairly decent for me. He got a 15-pointer against Brighton Hove Albion. Fair play to those that went for the captaincy on the Egyptian. We all anticipated a quite high-scoring game. I went for 3-2 Liverpool, ended up being 2-2, and Salah was the catalyst there, scoring both goals there from the penalty spot and also from open play, and he's one of the best assets to have from now up until Game Week 16 arguably, and perhaps even beyond that. And most of us would go for Salah over Erling Haaland on the wild card if we had to pick one of those two premiums. Then we go to the other two midfielders, James Maddison and his partner in crime from Tottenham Hotspur, Heung-min Son. Maddison got the assist for Van der Ven, whilst Heung-min Son blanked, and he was the most popular captaincy option in Game Week 8. The early kickoff curse strikes again, and let's not forget Salah does have an early kickoff at home to Everton. That could play a part in our captaincy thinking, but overall, very happy with Salah, decent from Maddison, and the rest were very disappointing. After selling him in Game Week 6, I brought back Ollie Watkins for Game Week 8, and he's only blanked once this season. His form has been absolutely scintillating. He even scored for England against Australia in a friendly. 4 goals and 7 assists in the Premier League is highly impressive to say the least, but I have to mention it. I've owned Watkins for 6 out of 8 game weeks this season and he hasn't scored a single goal, so he has been a bit of a troll from that perspective, but still fairly consistent, and you can't really deny him that. And the same goes for Erling Haaland, but he did blank, and he also was limited to 0.00 XG against Arsenal for the second time against the Gunners consecutively, and the first time in the Premier League, of course. And Man City were also limited to the lowest amount of shots they've ever had under Pep Guardiola in any match, and only 1 shot on target. They should have scored in the opening 5 to 10 minutes. They had 2 big chances from the same passage of play, but afterwards City didn't really create anything, and it was maybe a bit of a chess match between Arsenal and Man City, and Arsenal were just about the better team offensively and deserved the win, and they also defended very well against Man City, who also made some strange calls by not having Grealish or Doku starting, and I think that also hindered Haaland's chances of scoring or doing anything in that match. But I have no concerns about Haaland in the long term. I'm still very happy to keep him, of course, with Brighton and Bournemouth at home next in the next 3 game weeks. I don't really have any concerns there whatsoever. But that was my 11. Let me now talk about my captaincy and also the ranks and all of that jazz from Game Week 8. Technically speaking, this was my first green arrow of the season. I got 58 points and I'm now at 452 points overall. And I went up in rank by 1.1 million to 2.3. So I'm very happy with that. And also the captaincy was a bit disappointing going for Heung-min Son. I was actually considering going for the likes of Salah simply for the early kickoff curse and stuff like that, but I stuck with Son. I still thought he'd have plenty of chances against Luton Town, and he probably should have gotten an assist in that opening 20-30 minutes where Spurs were very dominant and they should have scored 2 or 3 goals at the very least. But Heung-min Son was very ineffective in that game overall, and Mohamed Salah was the game changer for Liverpool against Brighton. So in the end, the captaincy wasn't correct. If I did get that spot on, it could have been an absolutely massive week for me, but it's still progress. It's a good start on the wild card. Ultimately though, it's all about the long term with this chip, and I want to see the long term gains from using this. I also sold the likes of Raheem Sterling in Game Week 8 on the wild card, and he got a 16 pointer. So in the end, my non-wild card team would have scored very similarly to this. I think I gained a few points and I wouldn't have started the likes of Saliba, but there you go. It's still pretty decent. It's not the worst wild card, and ultimately it's a green arrow, and I haven't had enough of them this season. So let's now go into the Game Week 9 team selection portion of this video with my initial transfer plans for Game Week 9. This might be the last time I have a goalkeeper dilemma per se with Turner versus Areola, and in Game Week 9, based on the fixture, I think Turner is definitely a cut above the West Ham shot stopper, Aston Villa away for Areola, and Luton Town at home for Turner. I think this is the last time I will have a goalkeeper dilemma per se, and from Game Week 10 onwards, Areola will be the clear standout, and I probably won't have many thoughts in terms of which goalkeeper to start. Game Week 9 though is a different story, and I'm going to go for the fixture and play Turner for possibly the last time in a very long while. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but I think the American is probably the one to start this week, and he's also a very cheap enabler. I'm very happy with him so far. He's done a decent job for me, and whilst I don't trust Nottingham Forest defensively, they should have enough to keep a clean sheet against Luton Town. Oddly enough, my defense is probably a bit weaker on the wildcard compared to my non-wildcard team where I had Trippier and Saliba, but Matty Cash is a very good acquisition. At home to West Ham, I'm not expecting a clean sheet, but what Cash can do is provide an attack in return, and with the other 3 game weeks to come, I think Matty Cash can get some clean sheets and be one of the best defenders to own in FPL, but I'm not expecting a clean sheet here per se against West Ham, and my other defenders on the bench aren't really that great, with Joachim Andersen away to Newcastle and Lascelles at home to Crystal Palace, and Sven Botman could be back in Game Week 9, and if that's the case, then Lascelles is a very easy bench. If Botman isn't back though, then Lascelles could come into my starting 11, and I would not rule out the possibility of benching Matty Cash in such a situation, but there's always a risk when you bench a very attacking fullback like Matty Cash is. Now, the other 2 defenders are very locked in my starting 11, with Dan Burn at home to Crystal Palace, and I have to say, Roy Hodgson's men have been struggling a lot to score goals, and you would back Newcastle there for the clean sheet at home in St James's Park, and their recent defensive record is very impressive to say the least, despite conceding 2 goals to West Ham. Before that, they only conceded 1 goal in 5 games, and that was to Paris Saint-Germain. They also had a run of 4 consecutive clean sheets across all competitions, so Dan Burn is a very solid option, and a double up in Newcastle defensively is definitely viable, with Kieran Trippier being the standout. The last defender is Destiny Udogie at home to Fulham. I would back Spurs for the clean sheet here, and Spurs have a huge advantage over Fulham in this London derby. Of course, the main appeal with Spurs assets is offensively with Son and Maddison, but having 1 defender is certainly fine. I'm not a big fan of the double up defensively with Borro and Udogie, but that's not the worst scenario in the world either, and Udogie is certainly a very good option for the next 4 game weeks, and he's still a benchable option afterwards, and he can rotate with other defenders based on the fixtures. For the time being though, Udogie is quite a nailed-on starter in my FPL team. My midfield setup is fairly interesting this week with Diaby at home to West Ham United. It's not the easiest fixture, but you would back Aston Villa to score some goals in this match, and I think Diaby can certainly be capable of it, and he's had a very good start to his Aston Villa career. He's not maybe the most consistent player overall, but he's always a threat, and he can provide goals or assists very easily, and I'm backing him to do very well in this fixture. The same goes for Ward-Prowse, but the main appeal of Ward-Prowse and Jarrod Bowen is from Game Week 10 onwards, when they start a very good fixture run with Everton at home. But in these games like Game Week 8 that just went by, and now Aston Villa away, those aren't the easiest games, and it wouldn't surprise me if West Ham struggle to score. But overall, Aston Villa versus West Ham, you would anticipate a fairly high scoring game, maybe a 2-1 either way. A 2-2 draw is definitely not out of the realms of possibility, but I think West Ham will probably score 1 or 2 goals in this fixture. I'm not backing to score 3 or more, but you never know, and maybe that could be a blessing in disguise depending on how the rest of my Aston Villa players do. But Ward-Prowse is one of the main threats for West Ham, especially from set pieces, and I still like him, but I do have in the back of my mind that possible regret about not going for Pedro Neto and also bolstering my defence with Gabriel in for Lascelles. But either way, in the future, I can make such a move, or even downgrade Ward-Prowse to Gordon, as he's now back from suspension and has some very good fixtures there for Newcastle United. Next up is the hero from Game Week 8, Mohamed Salah, at home to Everton. It is an early kickoff. Liverpool could rotate, especially with the South Americans, and that could impact the final result. And Everton also had a big win against Bournemouth last week, and they also could be well up for it in this Merseyside derby. But Salah has a good record against the Evertonians, and I also think Salah is one of the very best captaincy options this week. But that will be the big debate. Who do we captain between Haaland, Heung-min Son, Salah? Even Kieran Trippier is a serious consideration, but I think Salah is easily top 2, and if it wasn't for the early kickoff, I think pretty much everyone who owns him would go for the Egyptian king. My final 2 midfielders is that duo I keep talking about from Spurs, James Maddison and Heung-min Son. Both of them are good captaincy options, but it's worth mentioning once again that James Maddison has failed to score or assist in all of his home games, yet away from home, he has produced a return in every single game. So if I was to favour a captaincy option from the Spurs assets, it would be Heung-min Son. But just bear in mind that both Maddison and Son have been nursing some minor injury problems. That's why they keep being taken off quite early on, around 70 or 80 minutes. Let's see if that situation improves. But ultimately, Heung-min Son is a better captaincy option than Maddison in home matches. And from this midfield 5, Salah would be my preference. The front two speaks for itself. Ollie Watkins has a relatively tough fixture against West Ham at home, but you would back Aston Villa to score in that game, and I need Ollie Watkins to finally score a goal whilst in my FPL team. His form for both club and country is very impressive, and he's one of the most informed players in England at the very least. And I'm not just talking about the England squad, I'm talking about any Premier League player at the moment. The final forward is Erling Haaland, who's in a bit of a rough patch, not scoring in 2 consecutive Premier League games and also free across all competitions, blanking against Leipzig as well in the Champions League. But I would be very surprised if he blanked against Brighton. I think City will score 2 or 3 minimum in that match, and if Haaland can get the service, he will return. There's no shadow of a doubt about it. And in my last 2 videos I said this, I think that Erling Haaland will score 4 goals in his next 3 Premier League games. And remember, he does face Brighton, Man United away, and then Bournemouth at home. So I think Erling Haaland will get back to scoring ways, and he already scored a brace for Norway in midweek against Cyprus, and I would highly anticipate more returns for the Norwegian goal scorer for Manchester City coming up. So now all that's left to discuss is the captaincy. My initial thoughts, because I have to admit, it could certainly change from now until the deadline. So keep an eye out for my future team selection video and much more headed your way for FPL, such as the rating your teams video and the deadline stream. The current bench order is Areola in goal, Lascelles first sub, Anderson and Cameron Archer. And if we get news of Sven Botman being back, then Lascelles could move to second on my bench. But if Botman is still out, then one possible change to my starting 11 is Lascelles in for either Matty Cash or James Ward-Prowse. That would be the big debate with this current setup. In the future team selection video, though, I will discuss some possible transfers, particularly in the midfield. I think that's the most likely area of the pitch where I could make a change. And then we have the captaincy debate, which will never end, it seems. I think Game Week 9 is massive, but I'm currently favouring Erling Haaland over Salah. Maybe the early kickoff is playing a bit in my mind, and I have to say, I think Salah will do well against Everton, but I also have that same belief about Erling Haaland, and I think the way Brighton defend at the moment is much worse than Everton even. And in my opinion, the Man City-Brighton match will be higher scoring than Liverpool versus Everton, which could be a bit cagier considering it's a derby and Everton could be well up for it. And of course, there's no denying that Brighton are a good football team, but defensively, they leave a lot to be desired. And I think Man City will bounce back with Rodri available now from suspension. And I also think following 2 defeats in a row in the Premier League, Man City will be very eager to put things right. And it would not surprise me if they scored 3 or 4 goals in Game Week 9. So that's my current setup, the starting 11 and the captaincy. A few things could change, of course. I could make a free transfer in the end. At the moment, my inclination is to roll, and then we've got a few other scenarios such as Lascelles possibly coming into my starting 11 for Ward-Prowse or Matty Cash. If Botman is back and Lascelles will surely be benched, then he will move second to my bench. So a few things could change, of course, the captaincy as well, and I could go to Salah in the end. Heung-min Son is also a consideration, but I have to say, with this current setup, the captaincy is most likely going to be between Haaland and Salah. On screen, you can see Drafthound. I have referenced this site in previous videos, and you can always see a link in the description below. And with my link, you can become a pro pay tier member and get access to so many metrics and tools to help bolster your FPL team and enjoy the game even more. In terms of expected points, I've got 69.6 according to Drafthound, which is fairly high considering it's an algorithm, and the team is already optimized in the best way possible. But according to Drafthound, I should have Archer first sub, Anderson second, and Lascelles third. So that's the only change from my current team selection. The rest is also actually exactly the same, including the captaincy. The algorithm does favour Haaland a little bit more compared to Salah, and the starting 11 is also the exact same too. And they're also suggesting some transfers such as Ward-Prowse to Gordon, Diaby to Gordon, and Anderson to Gabriel. And long term, I'm considering getting Gabriel in for Lascelles, and that could also mean downgrading Ward-Prowse to a Pedro Neto or Gordon. Those are possible transfers for me, which I will discuss in future videos for sure. And I have to say, I do agree with the way of thinking with Drafthound, but let's wait and see, of course. And you can't base all your decisions off the algorithm. Only use it as a starting point and as a foundation for your future moves. And in terms of some other things to really mention from Drafthound, the player rankings, Haaland, Salah, Son, Saka and Maddison is the top 5. And the news that I just saw from a reliable source, SR Collins, is that Saka is expected to be fit to play against Chelsea after the international break. So building upon what I said in the trans tips video, if you still have Saka, I will definitely hold on to him, and I think he's a great option against Chelsea and also in those home games coming up against Burnley and Sheffield Sheffield United, but I'm very happy with the starting 11. The only big absentees for me is Kieran Trippier, of course, who is a massive miss, and I wish I could have him as well. But with this current setup, I'm very happy. I would prioritize Salah and Haaland over Kieran Trippier. One possible thing I could do in the future is downgrade Son to a very cheap midfielder and then use those funds to upgrade one of my defenders like Lascelles to Kieran Trippier. So there's a lot of things I could do in the future, but as things stand, I'm very happy with this 50-man squad, and really the main target and priority is to bring in Saka in Game Week 10. In Game Week 10, I could bring 1 or 2 Arsenal players into my FPL team, with Saka and Gabriel being very high considerations for me. So Areola would be the starting goalkeeper at home to Everton, a solid back three of Udogie, Gabriel and Matty Cash, a midfield 5 of Saka, Salah, Maddison, Diaby and Ward-Prowse, and a front 2 of Haaland and Ollie Watkins. And the bench is also fairly decent. I know Turner, Anderson and Archer don't look great, but Burn could easily start in this team away to Wolves, but I would probably favour those 3 starting defenders over Burn, and I would expect Wolves to score in that game potentially. Of course, if it was Trippier, I would never bench him, but with Dan Burn, it's a little bit different, and my expected points is 64.6, and if I actually reverted the transfers, I'm fairly sure the expected points, according to fpl.team, would be around 58, so there is a massive upgrade to my points potential if I bring in Gabriel and Saka in Game Week 10. A lot will depend on prices, of course, because if there is a price rise for one of the players I'm looking to bring in, and I think Gabriel's very likely, or maybe one of my players is about to go down in price, then I could be priced out of these moves and I would have to go back to the drawing board. But I'd be very happy with this setup in Game Week 10. And of course, I don't like booking in transfers, and that's something that I should have maybe thought about more when I build the wild card, but it's not the end of the world. And my setup for Game Week 9 is still very good. I had a decent start in Game Week 8, and these transfers would look really good in Game Week 10, and not just for that game week, but also in the long term. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Which players are you looking to bring in the next couple of weeks? Who are you looking to captain in Game Week 9? And what are your plans to do with fixture swings like Brighton from Game Week 10 to 16? For me, the priorities will be Estupinian and Matoma. They're by far the best Brighton assets. And instead of doing Gabriel in for Lascelles, I could focus on Ward-Prowse being upgraded to Matoma. So I have a lot of flexibility with my 50-man squad, a lot of different transfer plans in the coming weeks, and all of that will be covered in my future team selection videos and the deadline streams. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Our aim is to get this video to over 300 likes and to get ever closer towards 21,000 subscribers and beyond. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for the Patreon and channel memberships, the Discord server, and the FPL League. All of the links are there. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 9. I hope you enjoy the rest of the international break, and I'll see you next time.